Okay, please could I ask everybody to take their seats? Thank you. So I asked marketing for a smoke machine, some lasers, and 2 white tigers to start this off. What do you think they said? It doesn't matter, though, because today's performance is going to be greater than a U2 concert in the Sphere. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Alex Cheeseman. I'm the head of enterprise for Outbrain. I'm here to guide you today on this attention extravaganza. We built this program to help answer the questions that we get around what is attention? What does it truly mean? How can it add value to my business? And we've pulled together 14 of the finest minds to answer those questions for you in the next 2 hours. And to kick things off, we're going to start with a real macro view, a look at media effectiveness, how Dr. Graziella Castro at HSBC thinks about media effectiveness, and how attention is a strategic pillar. And to have that discussion with her, we've got our very own Chief Revenue Officer, Alex Ermeyer. So please put your hands together for Dr. Graziella and Alex Ermeyer.
Hi everyone. I'm very glad to be here. For the ones who don't know me, my name is Alexander Ermeyer. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of Outbrain. 1, 2, 1, 2. You can hear me? Yeah? Good. Yes. So I'm very glad to be here for our inaugurational event, Attention, the Art and Science of Attention, Captivate. And yes, one thing to note, I'm basically the second choice here today, I have to admit. You were expecting our co-CEO, so was I, till 24 hours ago, more or less. But you might understand, David, our co-CEO, which is leading our headquarters in New York, traveled last week to Israel, also with a companion of his son. That was, or started actually on Monday, his new job at a VC company. And David decided to stay with him in Israel, also to stay with our team there. Obviously, it's very moving moments to this time, so we're all very touched, and we are really caring about all our employees there. David is doing so, and yeah, so it's very understandable that he is there. And yeah, but again, thanks to all of you for joining us today here. And today we are talking about attention, we're talking about shifts, we're talking about what's happening in the marketing industry. And there are a lot of opportunities that have arisen in the last years. We have now our average attention time, not attention, we have an average screen time of 10 hours for Americans right now. 10 hours a day, average on screen. But that seems like a infinite opportunity. But on the other hand, since 2004, the average attention on the screen, the average attention time declined by 69%. So it's not about anymore time and money. What's really valuable these days is attention. And if I would ask my wife, actually she tells me that all the time, I don't care how much money you earn. I don't care how long hours you work. What I care about is when you're with me, that I have your full attention. And I can tell you, I'm failing miserably. Many times, too often, definitely. So yes, this is what it is about. So it's more about, do we get with our ads to real people, and do we get their attention? This is way more valuable in these times than just the technical measurement of viewability, right? 10 hours viewability, kind of, yeah, but how much of attention? And yeah, we brought, as said today, 14 very, very strong minds together talking about attention. And I think, and I'm very excited to learn today about attention, because also we at Outbrain, we fundamentally believe that this is a major shift. We see there is a correlation of attention, increased attention, and increased business outcomes. And that's what we are all getting paid for, right? So that's why we're talking today about attention. And that is why Outbrain moved now into attention, because we believe in this shift. We believe in moving from sheer viewability to attention. 15 years ago, I'm with Outbrain now over 10 years. 15 years ago, we started as a recommendation engine. We started to predict what people could be interested in. Then from there, we went in advertising and became a very valuable channel for content marketers and predicted engagement for consideration. And over time, we became probably one of the best prediction engines in the world in the open web, and a very valuable and powerful performance channel for many advertisers that were looking for a return on ad spend. And now this year, in June, we launched Onyx by Outbrain. Onyx by Outbrain is, for me, the logical consequence, because we know how to predict. We know how to predict attention. And now suddenly it makes sense. And now, Outbrain, this is the next evolution for us. We're becoming a full cross-funnel partner for our advertisers. And another thing, and I think I'm also speaking here now for David, our co-CEO, as one part of our mission is that we care about a sustainable media ecosystem. What we see, obviously, is more and more budgets shifting in social channels, search, etc., etc. But I think we all have a responsibility to also sustain and support quality and trustful journalism in these days more than ever. So my ask, my wish, please, when you look into your 2024 planning, please consider also publishers, trustworthy news publishers, because this is where we get the news, or we should get the news from. And yeah, that's also what Outbrain stands. And there's something in for you. We see it in our outcomes. You get a very engaged audience, not a very fluent one, so it's very engaged. And with that, what you also will get is higher attention. And yeah, but now let's talk a more scientific way about attention. And that's why I invited Dr. Graziella Castro on stage. Graziella is leading at HBC the global marketing effectiveness. And you are working with data all your career in a science environment. You moved on to the business, to the agency. You dealt with a lot of brands, and now you're sitting in HSBC within the brand. So that's why I think it's very interesting to hear what do you think about media and marketing effectiveness. Thanks for joining us, Graziella.
Thank you for inviting me.
So let's start with overall effectiveness. So as we just have heard, the media landscape and media consumption has changed so much over time. I think that's obviously also a big challenge for you as a brand. And with your experience from many brands now within the brand, with this unique view, how do you see media marketing effectiveness? What does it mean for you, and how have you built that into HSBC?
When I joined HSBC, the first things that I did is look what was media effectiveness already for HSBC. And me and my team, we go through an assessment of all of the markets and what was the approach. There is not a perfect solution, but it is a perfect framework. And the perfect framework is make sure that you have your foundation of effectiveness. You have your KPIs, the one that really matters for the business, sorted out and agreed. That doesn't mean that for all the companies are the same. What is for your business will work. You have a measurement that is in place. And with the media landscape changing so fast, that is the most complicated things. What is the right mix of a measurement that we need to make sure that our effectiveness is estimated? Because otherwise, if we don't optimize what we have and we don't push the boundaries of new modeling, new ways of measure campaigns. We will reduce effectiveness into a pure and a very simple exercise of just keep track of our performance and then reporting back. But as the old quotes in marketing says, half of the money that we spend is wasted. I don't know which is the half, which one is the half that I'm wasting. So measurement is helping you to do that. As we speak, I don't think there is a company in the world that is able to actually measure the 100% of all the activities that they do in the most accurate way, because the media landscape is changing. So we need to keep that tested learning framework always there, always changing and making it better, and trying to really learning through the technology, anticipate the new trend, and being ahead of the curve.
And do you see now, as it's evolving so fast, right, and more media channels, do you see already shifts in the last time you joined, since I think you're now 1.5 years with HSBC?
Yeah.
Yes?
In terms of media effectiveness of this approach, yes. I would say I was very surprised by myself. There was a lot of a shift, a lot more measurement in place. This is not to say that we were not doing it, simply that there is a new ways of doing it. And also technology has changed. If we think about AI, ML technology and modeling a year ago, now we are way more sophisticated in what we do in marketing by using those models. So HSBC has pretty much the same approach. We tend to use the new technology and tested learning. What was it new? Expertise and knowledge on what it is marketing effectiveness is increasing, and this is not only at HSBC. I think this is increasing across the industry. We see there is way more job market right now around the marketing effectiveness role, which goes beyond just the strategy expertise. It's really about how do you identify the right budget, how do you identify the right ways of measuring campaign alongside with your strategy expertise, because otherwise you just have one side of the coin. If you don't know what marketing strategy is or what is budgeting or measurement, you cannot really achieve marketing effectiveness.
Yes, and I couldn't agree more, but now when we go from measuring overall effectiveness more into attention, the event today, Captivate, is about attention. And how much does attention play a role in your measurement? How do you have seen specific the KPI attention evolving over the last, let's say, 12 months? Is there movement?
Well, there is a movement. We are, I think, as the entire industry, we are just tested learning. We are trying to understand how we can leverage attention in our media planning to be more effective with our investment. The approach that we are having, it's more into see attention as an input for your media planning than not as the output of your media planning. And this allows us to look at this as the quality of the attention that we are looking at, whether it's the duration or whether it's the type of attention. And to give you an example, if we look at our marketing brand building activities, the type of attention that we want to reach in our media planning is about longer duration, more active attention. And this is because we need to have that big impact and we're gonna make sure that our media planning, our mix of our media planning is set up against this idea of longer duration and active attention. Versus when we look at the short-term activities that we do, and maybe we are targeting a more engaged audience, it's more about the product than not the brand itself, then the media planning can be more driven by reaching a lower threshold of duration and passive and active attention.
Okay. Now, we talked about the last months, we talked about how it evolved. Now, you're the expert, and we are here trying to build an event that is thought-provoking. How do you see it evolving in the next 12 to 24 months? Or what do you see, what would you advise this audience to look after?
It's a very interesting question. So I don't think we're going to move a lot the needle in just 12 months. And we have seen when I joined, when I left the academia and I joined the industry, one of the first topics that I was very interested in was attention. And a lot of people told to me back in the days, attention is academia. It's not marketing word. It won't be able to be deployed in marketing. And if now I think back that was the right thing, the right answer to me is the academia. But this doesn't necessarily mean that after all this time, now we are here having a conference talking about attention and the fact that we are able to measure a little bit of attention. So in the next 12 months, I think what we are still missing is once we reach that attention, how do we sustain the attention? What is happening after that we reach that attention that we wanted and we plan our media activities against attention? And still today, we are too much relying into a measurement that is based on survey. And survey means that we are simply asking people what they have done after. So we are relying on what people are claiming as an action. And let me quote Pareto. He was used to say, what people say is not necessarily correspond to what people do. So we need to make sure that in the next 12 months, 24 months, our measurement that is based on survey become less dependent by survey and get a little bit more accurate in what actually is happening after we reach the right level of attention in our marketing activities.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's try to find out what people actually doing. That's what it's about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Graziella Castro and Alex. We now have got an agency panel, and the reason we brought this agency panel together was to ask all of the questions that are on your mind. These people live and breathe attention. They're absolute experts in their market, and they're here to set provocations, to challenge the attention measurement platforms that are here, to challenge the people that look at creativity and give you an attention score. So without further ado, please let's welcome up James, Andrew, Stephanie, Vicky, and the team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Alex, for that warm welcome. And thank you to Alex and Dr. Castro. I don't feel like I can first name somebody with an actual title like Doctor, so we'll go with a full name. I think that was a wonderful framing. And Alex, thank you again for joining us at short notice. I think it's incredible that EasyJet managed to get you here on time, as expected this morning. So as Alex was introducing, we've got 4 leading minds in the agency landscape here to talk to you about attention. We'll start with some quick introductions. Don't worry, I won't do it for them, but I will introduce myself first of all. My name is James. I'm the Managing Director for Outbrain in Northern Europe. And beside me, I have Stephanie.
I'm Stephanie. I'm Global Data Analytics Director for Essence Mediacom for one of our biggest CPG clients.
Hi, my name is James. I head up business intelligence for Zenith globally.
Hi, my name's Vicky. I'm one of the planning partners at 7 Stars.
I'm Andrew. When I signed up for this, I was head of digital planning at Wavemaker, and I'm day 4 into a new job at a tech company.
We didn't cause that change, hopefully.
We agreed
that wasn't on us. Wonderful, thank you, guys. And as Alex said, the idea of this panel is somewhat different. I think the topic of attention underneath the broader topic of marketing effectiveness holds a lot of questions for a lot of people in the room. Otherwise, we wouldn't get close to 200 people to turn up and listen to us talk about it. So rather than do a discourse of just Q&A, this panel's aim is to be more question than answer. So we've asked the panel here to come up with what are their questions about attention? What are the things that are troubling them from their point of view when they're planning for their clients, when they're executing media, or even if they're thinking about bigger topics within their agency? What are the questions that are going unanswered at the moment? With the hope that those provocations, once we've listened to them, then can be taken on by the other panelists in the later sessions and answered as thought-provoking pieces. So the good news, again, is you're not going to have to listen to me. I will hand you over to the actual experts for their provocation. So, Stephanie, why don't we start with you?
Sure, thanks. I think there's a lot of talk about attention, not only today, but everywhere. And if you want to take somehow the signal from the noise. I think it's super important that we step back and ask ourselves, what is the role of attention and what can it do for me, rather than just implementing it and coming out with some plans with insight to say, well, that one drove a bit more attention than the other piece, like Graziella already said. So I think that's not how we want to approach it. So it's really about stepping back and asking ourselves, why do we spend media? Why do we spend advertising money? And in the end, we'll do that because we want to make sure it delivers an outcome that matters. And for many of the companies, that outcome is sales. And if that's the question, so if that's the point, the next logical question is then, is attention able to drive more sales? Could it be a proxy for sales? Does it even correlate to sales? And to really understand that, you have to have a rigorous testing approach in a way to set up an A/B approach where you can then look at both and understand, is my business as usual performing versus attention in regards to sales? So we've started that journey and we've seen pretty good promises so far. But even if we turn the promises into confidence, I think we still have to figure out how to use attention, because there's so many use cases within planning, buying, and optimization. If you just stay within optimization use case, there's still the question about how can attention make the biggest impact? And within optimization, it's heavily linked to the volatility of the media placement. And we've seen high opportunities in programmatic. We've seen less so in social. And reason for that is because the media's just been used differently, which creates the volatility. And even if you then go for that high opportunity, within that, right, so there are different ways how to apply it. So you can go via PMPs, you can do manual optimizations powered by dashboards on the live campaigns. You can even create bidding algorithms that are fueled with attention. And all of this then, depending on what you go for, it comes with a cost. It comes with the cost of technology, it comes with the costs for media, it comes also with the cost for people and personnel and resources, specifically if you go for that manual process, which then layers an efficiency aspect into that whole effectiveness point I made a bit earlier. So the big question for me is not only can attention drive more sales, but also can it deliver a higher ROI? And I don't think we have all of the answers today, but I think I'm happy to follow up.
Thank you, Stephanie. So I think that surmising that, is attention worth a squeeze? Is it really, really worth it? Thank you. James?
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, as you can see from my title, I've got a strategy background as well as being our head of business intelligence. And the way that I would approach this is kind of from a macro perspective, which is, certainly within the business intelligence role, we can link attention as being an important metric to immediate sales. And in fact, we've got a tool called Right Reach that does that for different categories. I think if this is going to be a metric that sticks for the long term, though, we need to start to appreciate how it can be involved in brand building or kind of further up the consumer journey for where there's less research. And from my perspective, I think there's kind of two elements to this. So if you look at it through the lens of trying to create a single experience for the customer across the whole journey, but then at each stage of that journey, what you'll see is that different facets of marketing will be involved in different parts of that process, and each of them needs to know, how much time needs to be spent with their advertising in order to achieve the goal of shifting people from one part of the consumer journey through to the next part of that consumer journey. And then the other thing I'd think about is it's not just from a paid perspective, and I think a lot of the research that's in place at the moment is around paid media channels, whereas actually from an owned and earned perspective, these are, kind of post-cost of living crisis, increasingly important channels, because if you promise something in paid, but that experience isn't driven through, or people don't have the right kind of experience, or haven't spent enough time with your brand outside of your paid channels, you're not going to drive, the equity, the retention that you're looking for. So I feel like, from my perspective, there are two different elements here. One is a better understanding of how attention is important purposively in terms of the actions that it generates from the consumer, and those will be different depending on which part of the consumer journey they're at. And that makes a big impact in terms of buying efficiency as well as effectiveness in terms of For example, at the moment, you might look at media planning based on, how much does it cost to buy a channel? What reach does that channel have? What kind of attention does that channel have? But if you're a small brand, you're probably going to be focused much more on driving awareness. And if you're a big brand, it's probably more consideration, kind of purchase, post-purchase. My assumption or hypothesis would be the amount of attention in terms of time spent with advertising, and I think eye tracking is probably the best way of measuring that, will be different for those two things. So, when you kind of pump that through the overarching machine that gets you to your media plan, you'll come up with a very different media plan depending on what stage of the consumer journey your focal effort is, depending on the size of your brand. So we're starting to do some initial research with Lumen on that. It's one category. It's versus an existing piece of, or I should say, massive database of research that we have called Touchpoints, which is a paid-owned norms database based on survey data. We're starting to try and apply attention data to that because we can cut it down by journey stage and understand, in terms of the amount of seconds needed, depending on the consumer journey task, what's the difference and what are the right channels? And I think at the moment it's very much a kind of overarching metric, and to a certain extent, I don't want to say a buzz metric, but something we know has a really strong short-term impact on business. But when we're starting to brand build, I think that's when a lot of that research falls away. So I'm finishing.
No, it's a super interesting topic. One you could obviously talk about all afternoon, but we need to try and get some answers.
So my provocation would be, do we have enough research on what's happening in the space of, A, understanding the amount of attention in terms of time spent, actual time spent looking at advertising required to push someone from one stage to the next, and B, do we have enough research in terms of the fact that that will probably be a collaboration between paid-owned and earned channels and different facets of the marketing team rather than the current paid perspective that I feel like a lot of the research is weighted towards. Sorry.
Amazing. No, it's brilliant. Thank you so much. Vicky.
Yeah, so being part of the planning team, I thought that I would look at attention in relation to overarching media plans and channel strategy, and what effectiveness that therefore drives for our clients' business. And I think the reality is that attention is only adding value when we see a response from it. There's a lot of conversation around attention and measuring attention, but if that's not turning into sort of meaningful actions and responses from our clients' consumers, then it's not really kind of making any change. So with any sort of comms planner, and it's critical for a planning role, we need to make sure that we're setting the KPIs right. And the reality is that those are going to be different depending on where you are in the consumer journey. And that's no different for attention metrics. So, if you think about awareness, you might do sort of eye tracking or hover rate. If you're going into the consideration phase, you might be looking more at sort of social conversations or dwell time. But really the challenge there comes that when you look at KPIs so granularly, the reality is you forget about that bigger picture. And that's really kind of the critical role of the planner, to understand exactly what's happening in that bigger picture. And often sometimes that can sway our media channel selection. So if I take cinema, for example, it's a really immersive environment. Obviously, the attention in that environment is great. But the relative CPTs and the entry-level costs that clients would have to pay to get into that channel mean that actually it's just not feasible. So we need to think about how attention could be swaying that upfront sort of channel decisions in what we're doing. So for me, really, it's a balancing act when we come to doing that planning work, thinking about exactly where attention comes into that journey. And really, we need to think about attention is just part of the effectiveness conversation. We can take people there and make them aware of it, but if they don't retain that information, it's kind of meaningless. So the correlation between attention and memory retention is also going to be critical going forwards.
Amazing. So not losing sight of the wider goal by focusing too narrowly on one aspect.
Exactly that.
Thank you.
Cool.
Andrew.
Oh yeah, you can't see the aggressive timer that I've got down here. It's like mother-in-law's eyes at a wedding speech. But
sorry, by the way, I think that's on me.
Yeah, it's definitely on you. There's two halves to what we're talking about, right? In attention, there's like the philosophy side of this thing, which is what is the value of the attention? Just what you were talking about there. So not all attention is equal. So I've worked with Steffi for a long time. I love Steffi very much. And so say I was going to buy you a luxury bag, the same bag in two places, made in the same sweatshop, I've got one. I show it to you in Splot Market in Cardiff, and for the same amount of time, and then I take you down Bond Street and show you the same bag for the same amount of time. You'll have a different impact, right? So not all attention is equal, and so the impact that attention has is something that we should be considering. And then on the other side of things, we've got the metrics, which is why we're all here. We've got these new partners who can suddenly gamify all these different digital metrics, like Adelaide and Playground and Firefly, and all these great partners. And speaking to IS, they kind of laugh and find it a bit cringe, because what all they're doing is gamifying measures we've always had. We've always had clash, we've always had clutter, we've always had viewability, we've always had time in view. And so creating this black box measure and then a score is actually a little bit cringe, and it's a little bit digital. It's the new click-through rate in that respect. It's trying to create. It's gone down to naught. I'll finish in a sec. It's trying to create a thing where we're sort of conflating efficiency and effectiveness, and it's kind of embarrassing for digital practitioners to jump on it like this. So my provocation, I think, is like we need to stop being so digital about it and think about it in the short, medium, and long term. There's some brilliant work out. I know we've seen System 1 with Orlando, and Soren at Mars is doing amazing work. There's brilliant work out there, and it's different for every client, and that's the way we need to think about it. Not attention is good. Because if attention is good, I'll just go and buy mobile interstitials, but no one will buy anything.
No, thank you, Andrew. I think that's a great way of finishing it, because it's a provocation that hopefully the guys up next will be able to tackle head on. But I just want to we are out of time, as Andrew says, but I wanted to just take a moment to thank you, all of the panellists for taking part and giving your input, your questions, and your provocation. Much appreciated. Thank
No
you.
worries at all. Thank you.
So now we've set the table for the three most powerful attention measurement platforms to come on stage and answer some of these questions. I'd like everybody to please stand up. Please, can we have a standing ovation for Tan, Alex, and Mark. Up you come, guys. You can sit back down now.
Welcome. So first, I'll repeat the gratitude for everyone turning out. We're very privileged in two ways. First, the privilege of hosting the speakers that we have here. I'll introduce in just a moment, but also everyone joining us on a rainy Thursday. Thank you for coming down. It is my great privilege to host a discussion between three industry heavyweights, all of whom are doing probably the hardest thing to do in digital advertising, which is drag us forwards and take us to a better place and disrupt a status quo, which I think nobody is particularly delighted with. We will talk about the provocations. I think first I'll just kick us off with a quick introduction. So, Tamwa, we're lucky to have you. Seriously, very few people in the industry have empathy for what it's like to be inside brand marketing, inside the agency, inside the publisher, and now building solutions as Chief Strategy Officer for Lumen. Thank you for joining us. Mark, similarly, as the co-founder, CEO of Adelaide, another heavyweight in the industry who has consistently been developing solutions to improve how we measure, think about, and improve on media effectiveness and beyond. Thank you for joining us. And Alex, really one of the OGs of the digital advertising industry, brings a global view to the discussion as well, in leadership roles really around the world in the biggest names in the industry that you're all familiar with, including names like Yahoo, Unruly, and now Executive VP at Amplified Intelligence. If I could have a quick round of applause again for our panelists here. So we had some fantastic provocations. We'll get to those. But first, I think it's important for you all to address, maybe Tan, you could kick us off. And just why are we here talking about attention? Where are we trying to go from? And where are we trying to get to?
I think the key thing to almost start off with is we're trying to move forward. And I think we shouldn't just be too hard on ourselves and expect all the answers today. And I think that's the key. We're all still learning. But we know there's an improvement and a step forward in the right direction. And it brings all key stakeholders together. So we know media is fragmented. We know how we work is too siloed as an industry, and we suddenly have something that everyone can get value from in order to actually look at business objectives and moving the dial forward.
Absolutely, thank you. And Mark, when we think of what we're trading on today at large, despite the chatter, what's wrong with what's really happening under the hood today?
Let's see. So what's wrong with really what's happening today is high quality publishers can't command a price which is commensurate with the value they're offering to the industry. So the metrics that people are using today, just like raw impressions or viewability, create the wrong incentives for small ads on big screens, basically driving low attention. So I think that getting a shared understanding of what quality actually means is super important, like to get us out of this, what's essentially becoming a lemon market, into a place where we can reward high quality publishers for creating high quality advertising opportunities, and then we can also give advertisers the justification to pay more for those environments.
Yeah, when we think about transacting on essentially still today a display impression and viewability as a filter, which is essentially where 90% of it is today, Alex, what's the essential next step forwards from there?
Well, I think that the next step forward is we have to complement what's already in place and what systems and measures that our clients, the brands and agencies are working with. So attention is another dimension that complements that and fills some of the gaps and helps colour in what is the format that works, what is the format on what platform, on what page, on what domain, what subdomain that works, so that we're really helping to drive media efficiency, because that's ultimately how we move forwards, to Tamara's point. If we want to move forward, we have to show brands, we have to show agencies how we can help, or attention can help, filling those gaps and help drive media efficiency.
You mentioned a few elements there. Could you expand on the definition and some of the attributes that you think are essential for us understanding attention in your eyes?
Well, the attention at its basic format is how long does a consumer look at your ad? Ultimately, all marketers want consumers to look at their ads. That's how they derive actions. So in order to increase your media efficiency, you have to look at how you can put the research in and go into the propagation panel. How do you help strategists understand what format, on what platform, on what time or what given day actually holds attention? And how long do they hold that attention for? Because that's what's going to drive your media efficiency. Once you've improved your media efficiency, then you're looking at driving a set of outcomes. So it's again, to Tamara's point and to Mark's, it's a step process, and we have to be able to help you guys fill in those gaps. Once we've filled in those gaps, it complements the systems you've already got, and therefore you can make better informed decisions to drive that level of efficiency.
And Mark, what do you think to that?
Well, so we've been doing this for about 9 years. The founding team at Adelaide started a company called Parsec about 9 years ago, where we were selling media on a cost per second. It worked really well. Like, we saw much lower costs per incremental outcome than our competitors. But when we started doing a lot of optimization, things started to go a little pear-shaped. And I think it's really important to highlight this, because we've heard several people today talk about attention as duration, or like how long somebody's looking at the ad. And that's sort of like, it's a very simplistic but obvious first step. I don't want to say it's stupid, but it's just like, it's naive, because the amount of time that somebody spends looking at an ad is an outcome in and of itself, right? And that's what we found at Parsec, was when we started to optimize the maximum amount of attention, we were having these sort of unexpected effects on audience and on creative. Like, the creative that we were incentivized to run was the creative that captured the most attention, and not the creative that drove the most impact, right? And the audience stuff got really weird. And Facebook's just come out with some really interesting research about this, showing that older people pay more attention to ads than younger people. There's research showing that intoxicated people take 33% longer to read things than sober people. There's a lot of research that shows that people that are already aware of your brand will pay more attention to your ads than people that aren't aware of your brand. So it's really, really important to not optimize the maximum amount of attention on an impression level or on a campaign level, because you're going to get old drunk people, and that those now they might convert, right? Like they might buy stuff, but that's not really what you want your brand to do. So, but that's an obvious first step in attention. I don't blame you guys for talking about duration, but at Adelaide, the insight that we have is that media's job is to create an opportunity for attention. So if you want to judge the quality of an opportunity, you think about probability. And so what we do is we measure the probability of attention by any person to any creative in a placement. And it creates a static score on the placement, which you can use to understand media quality. And when I talk to brands about this, that's what they're after. Brands are after like a better understanding of media quality and an easy way to use that to drive better outcomes. So I think it's really important to move this conversation away from how can we drive the most amount of attention to ads to how can we create the highest probability of attention by any person to ads.
And surely you want to drive it to where people are looking, to where the consumers are paying attention.
Yeah, totally.
Just because you scored something highly doesn't mean to say a consumer's looking at it.
It's a probability they look at it.
But that doesn't drive the equation, does it? The truest and formest and most accurate part is humans are looking at ads in certain formats at certain times, and therefore that creates the probability. And that's where attention companies are driving the efficiency to help agencies, not I'm going to give it a score.
Yeah, but everybody here has a metric, and your metric is duration or attention time or attention seconds, whatever it is. When you create a metric, it's your responsibility to think about the incentives that it creates. And when your metric is the duration of attention, everybody's going to look at that and be like, I need to make it go up and to the right. Like that I need to make more of that. And when you optimize your campaigns towards more duration, you just get old people. We found this at Parsec.
This also leans into one of the provocations, which is drill anything down to a metric. Do we have the gamification issue again, or some form of that? So, Tan, what do you think to that?
I think that's one of the key things. Lots of people talk about meaningful media and wanting to do all of that. And what we really can't get away from is that making attention a meaningless currency and metric. And that's really key. And so when we talk about optimization, it isn't just a number that everyone should be aiming at. So it really is about the KPIs and the objectives. And really, it's going to be unique to every single client based on their starting point and where they want to get to. So if I could just stress that we shouldn't all be aiming for gold standard, because what that gold standard looks like is going to always be very different. The key thing is to get the optimal amount of attention, but what that optimal looks like will be very different.
Yeah, we were quite lucky to hear from agency heavyweights in advance, not just on the panel here, but also beforehand. And one of the topics raised was there isn't standardization yet. There isn't enough consistency yet in the definition of attention for us to go all in. But it sounds like you're hinting at, well, standardization might not be a good thing. Mark, I know this is something you touched on in advance as well. What do you think to that?
Yeah, I think there's two ways to get to currency. The first way is by fiat or mandate, and that's like, if the IAB says 50% for 1 second. I don't think that's a great way for markets to get to currencies. I think a much more stable way with a lot more longevity is via arbitrage. So you give the buy-side data, they use that data to arb. As the value or the alpha from the arb compresses and price approaches value, then they start to buyers go to sellers and say, hey, will you guarantee me the thing that I'm buying using this new metric? And that's like a more market-driven, arbitrage-driven way to get to a currency. That's the approach that we're taking, and I think it's a much more sort of effective way to do it.
Alex, what do you think to that?
I think that's fine. I think ultimately the market's going to decide whether attention becomes a dimension that they add on to their existing processes and procedures to formulate their own ideas and their own way of driving that efficiency. Or the market could go and say, hey, we're going to drive towards the station of currency and we're going to try and arbitrage on attention seconds in that way. Time will tell. I think it's too early at the moment. I think at the moment there is enough room for attention to play with MMM modeling nicely, to play with reach and frequency modeling nicely, to talk about how you can have attention adjusted reach curves so that you know exactly how many humans you're looking to target. or going to reach with your attention optimized media schedule. So you have your original schedule, you have your new schedule. And I think that it's a case of the brands and the agencies will decide what's going to help them most going forwards.
And I think there are a couple of things that can be standardised, or there are differentials, because it's almost where your starting point is and what you mean by attention and how you capture that. So, for example, human eyes is really, really important to us. And it's really important to... there are probably about 4 of us that sit in that group, I would say. And I think that's a key thing for people to think about, actually. How important do you see that? We absolutely see that as critical, because that is the difference. It's actually what people are genuinely looking at rather than just jumping to a model.
One of the questions that comes up from time to time there is, how effective can panels and predictive models be, given we can't measure that every single time?
Yeah, well, that's a really good point, because any predictive model should be trained on outcomes, right? Like the dependent variable in any metric that you make for advertising should be outcomes. It shouldn't be how much attention, right? So you don't want to try to predict how much attention someone's going to pay. You want to start to look at what are the signals that are predictive of attention, and then use those to build algorithms that actually predict outcomes. And the currency conversation, I just want to go back to that for a second. It's very important that we do not use duration of gaze or duration of attention as a currency. There is no premium publisher on the planet who will take responsibility for the quality of creative. The quality of creative is really what drives the amount of attention that people pay to ads, and that it will fail as a currency if we lean too hard on duration.
We have some of the world's leading, most trusted editorial publishers in the room, so it's a good segue into us thinking about what is the impact on publishers as we go further down the path, Alex, on the topic of attention.
I think we're going to see increasingly publishers will use attention as a way of providing an extra pricing metric to their inventory. To some extent, I agree with Mark. There will be publishers who have formats on certain subdomains, domains, or in certain environments, certain cinemas, certain outdoor placements, that will drive more attention, and therefore, unequivocally, the consumer will have a greater propensity to follow up and create an outcome. But in reality, it's got to be done in conjunction with what is that agency and brand trying to achieve at that time? How does attention complement that by adding that extra dimension of, it's no good just relying on proxy data. If you just rely on impression level data, what's training that data? What's making that data honest? Ground truth data, which anybody who's involved in data analytics and data science will understand, it's the most accurate data you can get. Well, that accuracy comes from retinal gaze tracking, right? That's the only way you're going to understand what is an ad doing for a brand, what is a format doing for the publisher. So when a publisher understands how their formats are performing, they are then able to operate by creating whatever they wish to do, an extra dimension, a private marketplace of attention, high attention units or formats by a certain number of seconds. So it makes it easier for the programmatic side to come in and say, hey, I want to buy a PMP that is going to give me an extra 2.5 seconds of attention. That's where I think we're going to see the market driving to.
That's just going to be old people.
What's your obsession with old people?
Well, my obsession is in making metrics that create thoughtful outcomes, right?
But you're not. You're using proxy data that nobody's looking at, young, old, or indifferent.
No. We licensed all the eye tracking data. We're probably the biggest licenser of eye tracking data in the world. We licensed before you guys.
That's not true.
Not true. That is so not true.
Sorry, before you guys read the comment, we licensed all of your data.
You paid for.
We'll give Mark a moment to finish the point, and then we'll come back around.
We have all of your data. We have your data before you guys joined, before you guys were doing measurement. You were just doing eye tracking. We licensed all of your data. We licensed data from TVision, from Toby. We license as much eye tracking data as we can get our hands on, but it's the outcomes that matter. You can have all of the attention in the world, and if it doesn't drive an outcome, who cares?
Tan.
Okay. I don't think anyone's really questioning that we've got to look at outcomes. I think that's a given, and that's a hygiene factor, and that's there's no argument there. So I now don't even know what question I'm
Well,
answering.
absolutely, very fair.
My attention's gone somewhere else.
When we think about outcomes, and if we go beyond duration in view, and when you think of your experience as a brand marketer as well yourself, what are the other elements that we should be looking to measure and add to models to bridge the gap between in view to an outcome?
Do you know what? There's so many factors that you should think about. And again, without sort of giving a definitive list, I would say the other element which makes attention so exciting is the piece about, actually, it's not just a measurement that looks at digital. So you can look at sort of multi-platform, you can look at actually absolutely everything within your media marketing mix. But in addition to that, the creative piece. And I think that's one of the key elements that shouldn't be forgotten, because it doesn't matter how well you buy your media if your creative's not right for that particular platform as well. And so it's giving people a tangible proof point to be able to have that discussion at the table and not just think something's not working because of something else. And I think that's really key, sort of bringing all those factors. We also look at, I think one of the guys from the agency, but that also really excites me, the fact that it's a metric that planners and strategists are really excited by, or at least interested in, and it's not just something that stops at the buying table and then you get that disconnect between the strategic thought and vision and everyone isn't on the same page. So I think that's also really important. We also actually, in answering one of the other questions, we look at stuff above the line, below the line, and you can do that with the human eyes methodology of attention. So we've looked at, PR, and actually what does that do? And you can look at that within the mix of everything, so it's not as siloed. And I think that's really important.
Great. So, Alex, one of the provocations was actually that outcomes question, which is, do we have evidence that taking an attention-based approach to measurement and optimization in any form will actually deliver me better business outcomes for my advertiser? What do you think to that?
I think we're still at early stages on that, but you'd be foolish not to think that if you get consumers to pay more attention to your messaging and therefore drive a response on that messaging, outcomes are not going to be positively affected. If you look at models like MRC, where they state that an attention optimized campaign is 30 to 40%, 3 to 5 times better in performance than it was if you just do a viewability campaign. So there's no doubt, to Tan's point and to Mark's point, outcomes are going to be affected by attention, but you have to put the right building blocks in place to maximize the effect of that attention. And that needs to sit alongside the current models that agencies and brands are using and understanding and being familiar with in order to understand how they can improve the efficiency. Because it's all about, is my media working at an optimum level for me? And if it is, it's which ones are working at an optimal level for me. Dr. Graziano said, 50% we don't know. Yeah, we don't. But what attention will do will help identify which is the 50% that is, and then hone in on that is within that 50%, what's driving the best efficiency.
So, yeah, can we get excited about the move towards outcomes in this space then, Mark?
Yeah, I think I've made that point. So the outcomes,
only from old people, all right?
I don't know, man. Yes, if you use your metric, you're just going to get old people. Yeah. So here's the thing. The really cool part with creative and media and attention is that you can start to hold constant the quality of your media and drive more insights around the quality of creative. I don't think you should optimize the creative that captures the most attention. That creates some really weird biases. But when you can start to really hold constant media, you'll get lots more insights into what creative is good and what creative is bad, and what impact is actually coming from creative and what's coming from media.
But in that media, it has format size. There are different sizes. You need to work on the one that works, not on just a media in general at that top level.
Yes.
Keep an eye on time. Unfortunately, we've only got a couple of minutes left. I think we've got quite a lot of alignment in the room in terms of a desire, and up here in terms of practical usefulness of where we are already today. So given that you've got peers in the room who agree, we need to move closer to genuine attention and engagement in judging the media, the creative and campaign effectiveness. What's your advice for a practical next better step, Tan, to go first?
Yeah, well, I think, we've had the likes of PwC audit us to show that actually, it does drive outcomes, like we've all said. I think, a number of people have already mentioned the test and learn approach, and that's what I would say. It's like everyone can ask for constant case studies and proof points, etc., but a case study that works for someone else isn't a case study that's necessarily going to work for you. So I would just say, actually, if we're all committed to knowing that this is an improvement, you're going to have to put your money out and you're going to have to take that step and you're going to have to test. Test small, learn, because actually it's that learn and that insight for your particular challenge that's going to be the most beneficial. So I would say it's not actually being brave because you can test in a small way, but just take that step forward.
Yeah, we have all of our clients run through an A/B test where they have a cell that's like business as usual and a cell that's AU or attention units. We've seen a pretty much 99% of the time you're able to drive better outcomes with AU than you are with business as usual. So I think there's evidence at the top of the funnel, there's evidence at the bottom of the funnel. We see it very, very consistently. So I would encourage everybody to do that as the first step. Like run a test, understand what the cost of incremental outcomes is when you're using today's metrics versus when you're using attention metrics.
Yeah, I think it's know what your KPIs are, understand what it is you're trying to achieve, have a look at what's available on the market and which is the best solution that will get you close to where you want to be or deliver with what you want from those outcomes and those KPIs, and do some testing. And it doesn't hurt to test with more than one vendor, because ultimately that's how you'll find which vendor works best for which brand or which particular KPIs that you're being targeted on.
Thank you. So I just want to reiterate deep gratitude for the three of you joining us here today. There's no doubt we're in the midst of a really important evolution away from weak metrics in terms of a connection to an outcome and with attention to a significantly better place. So thank you very much. I'd like to offer a round of applause for our guests here today. Thank you very much.
It's such an honor and a privilege to have three of the brightest minds when it comes to attention. I really encourage everybody here to stick around at 4 o'clock and have the conversation with these people. It's a rarity to have them in the same room, and I encourage you to pick their brains and ask the questions that we haven't got time for. Now, moving on. Publishers were mentioned a few times. It's now time to bring on a high-quality publisher and start to understand what they can do to drive incremental attention and to drive higher premiums for their advertising. So with that in mind, please welcome Anthony Crocker and Stephanie Himoff to the stage.
Hi. Thank you, Alex, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephanie Himoff, and I'm the EVP of Publisher of Outbrain, responsible for the global growth of our publishing business. So far, we've heard a lot about what does attention mean to the advertising world, both in terms of strategic planning and media execution. We've also heard from a previous panel about attention metrics, alluding to some recommendation about what could happen in a publishing environment. So I'm delighted to welcome you, Anthony, to represent the publishing industry and to hear your views. Anthony, you are the head of commercial success at The Telegraph. I'm going to read your LinkedIn profile, and according to LinkedIn, you describe yourself as an expert in delivering meaningful brand experiences in premium digital environment, and you're passionate about building a fair and sustainable industry for all.
I'd just like to say that wasn't me that wrote that. That was my colleague, Gavin.
Very clever, very clever marketing person. We
Never
like
said
the
that
sound
about
of it.
myself.
You got my attention, Anthony. Okay, the theme of today, and I need to read from the official program. In the intricate tapestry of publishing, The Telegraph doesn't just chase attention, they command it. Dive into a captivating fireside chat that explores the very soul of the attention strategy, grasps the mastery behind the Telegraph approach, where attention isn't merely about catching the eye, but resonating deeply, touching both the heart and intellect. Well, I hope I got your attention. But let's dive straight into the conversation, Anthony, if we may. When we met last time, we talked about, what does attention mean? And, you share your views that there's a lot of buzzword right now, and attention means a lot of different things to different people. Publishers all, trying different ways to, to push their attention initiatives forward. So for the Telegraph, high premium publisher, what does high intention means to you in the Telegraph?
So I think our journey in terms of interrogating what attention means to us and what quality attention quite specifically means to us really started when we shifted towards our subscription first strategy, because that then inevitably had a massive impact on our advertising proposition. Up until then, we had, like so many other publishers, been predominantly selling based on our ability to reach a certain scale, and obviously, still using things like clicks and an in-view rate at a very top level as a kind of proxy for what quality looked like. And obviously, with the changes to the subscription strategy, we put a paywall up. We made some massive changes to our website to really make it a premium reader-first environment, which meant taking away some of the intrusive formats that we'd, potentially been relying on in the past. So we really had to go back to the drawing board and say, actually, we can't rely on those things anymore. But equally, what we were seeing is we had this highly engaged audience, because we were now focused on a paid audience that were really engaged with the Telegraph as a brand. We knew that we had this, really, valuable kind of product and commodity that we needed to sell. So, for example, we knew that 90% of our readers trusted the content, and as a proxy of that, trusted the advertising that they would see, in our pages as a part of that. 55% of our readers actually explicitly said that they had major purchase decision off the back of seeing something in the Telegraph. And, we really knew that actually that was a fantastic environment for advertisers to be in. So we kind of suddenly realised actually that the metrics that we had been using for years just didn't tell that story. There was a huge blind spot in kind of how we delivered our value proposition and how we kind of gave evidence around that. So we came up with a program called Metrics That Matter, and that really focuses on 3 key areas. So the first thing we look at is the kind of the brand safety and the responsibility of our delivery proposition. So that's confirming that none of our ads are intrusive, that they are kind of clearly defined. The content and the editorial content, the advertising is held separately. Things like we use Moat, for example, to do things like the quality score. So not just looking at the URL string, but actually the entire content, looking for things like grammatical errors, repetition, and actually I think Moat will even do kind of a plagiarism test as well. So that enables us to prove with a tangible number that the content is of a certain quality. And obviously, we're completely brand safe compliant, and all of those things that are kind of really, really important. The second thing that we look at is the actual engagement with the ad itself. So there's nothing wrong with a good click-through rate. That's fantastic if you've achieved it, if you can give context around that and prove that that's been achieved in the right way. So we use metrics such as the hover and the attention quality metrics through Moat. We use other metrics like not just the in-view rate, but is the ad in view for a meaningful amount of time? And also we look at can we prove that the engagement with the content has been a positive experience? So we look for things like view-through rates and active dwell time, because we know that there's a halo effect, that if somebody's enjoying the content and that we're sharing ads responsibly in that space, that actually the ads are going to benefit from that kind of lean-in mindset that somebody's enjoying the content. And I'd just like to kind of, whilst we're talking about that as well, the other thing that's really important to kind of mention is when we set off on this journey, we didn't want to set up something that was exclusively Telegraph, that was proprietary. Our ambition was to prove that quality journalism across the board was a really valuable commodity for advertisers when advertising is kind of placed in a responsible way. So we purposefully use tools that exist across the market. We try and use language that other publishers are using, and we've actually gone into direct competitors and had the conversation and talked them through our approach to attention, so that they can beg, borrow, and steal, all of those strategies, and we can kind of cross, because we are stronger together. It needs to be a problem that we solve across publishing, not just for the Telegraph. And the final thing we do with the Metrics That Matter program is we try and actually prove that that's working. So up until 2018, unless you were doing a big kind of six-figure brand kind of partnership, we didn't offer anything from a brand outcome perspective. And we changed that. We started working with Brand Metrics. They were fantastic in kind of getting us on our journey in terms of understanding brand outcomes for that kind of bread and butter day-to-day display activity. So it's a relatively basic, straightforward process, but we retarget those that have been exposed to an ad, and we ask some very simple questions that allows us to determine where we've shifted the dial in terms of those kind of brand uplifts and outcomes. And that was it, really. I mean, the next stage of that was really then kind of looking at how we could use that data to create best practice, insights. So we've got 300 plus campaigns that have gone through that program now, and it's really about looking for trends and analysis that helps us kind of prove that actually it's really working.
Can you tell us a little bit more on that? Because I know that you recently shared in one of the presentations the 5 rules. If you had to synthesize the 5 rules of engagement.
Yeah.
And I think you had a very catchy headline, which was engage versus enrage.
Yeah.
So could you share with the audience a little bit more about your view and the kind of the 5 rules, the golden rules?
Yeah. So the 5 rules. I mean, just to very briefly cover them, it's really about thinking outside we call it thinking outside the frame or thinking outside the box. And actually, so much of the measurement that's in place at the moment is thinking about what's happening inside the frame of an ad. But actually, the biggest influence on an ad, in terms of the quality of attention it's receiving, is all about what's going on around the frame of that ad, how somebody's interacting with that content. Is that ad jarring or intrusive to that content experience? We know that we've got metrics like gold below the fold that actually prove that if you allow people to engage with their content for a reasonable amount of time, when you do present ads to them, they're much more likely to engage with them. So that's really important. To go back to your point on the engage versus enrage, that was really about trying to get advertisers to think about the negative outcome of chasing scale. So we came up with this visual, and it's basically at the very top you've got highly accurate, highly targeted campaigns, and let's say numbers just off the top of my head, 10 people go off and buy something as a result of that, and 1 person doesn't. Okay, that's great. But actually, as you go further down the scale, okay, maybe you are now getting to the point where 20 people buy something and 30 people buy something and 40 people buy something. But actually, are you thinking about, as you decrease your accuracy, as you decrease the budget that you're putting at a CPM level onto that, how many people are having a negative experience of that brand, and actually the net impact on that brand, even though you're looking at the 20, 30, 40, 50 people that did something positive as a result, are you thinking about the 150, the 200, the 300, the 400 people that did something negative, and actually your brand equity comes out negative? So the point of that is, it's a really tricky slope to go down, and actually, it's about quality over quantity.
Thank you for that. And maybe going back a bit on the provocation, one of the provocations said before in one of the previous panel about can attention actually drive measurable business outcome and positive ROI? And I think you alluded to how you measure and how you drive business outcome for your brands. What can you tell us a little bit more about what does success look like for your brand advertiser?
Yeah.
And if you may even share a case study with the audience in terms of what recent work that you've done.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest challenges we have as a publisher is post-click visibility, and we beg constantly clients to say, give us more information about what happened, post-click, so that we can then use that data to inform what we do in the future and actually create those case studies, right? But we've used the brand outcomes. We know that the accuracy of our targeting is really important. So the case study that I mentioned to you previously was Zoopla. It was the first campaign that we did a data match with. And we wanted to prove that actually that data match and having the accuracy of targeting data was going to be crucial to the success of the campaign. We saw a 6-fold increase in the action intent towards Zoopla as a brand compared to the benchmark for a property campaign. So that was a fantastic thing. But actually, to your point on brand outcomes, we're also looking at ways that we can use. We see ourselves as a data business now. You know, we have a unique user ID for each of our engaged users and readers. We call them readers, not users. And actually, we want to look at how we can use that data to create more sophisticated attribution models. So not focusing on, you know, last click attribution, but actually, if we're working with a data partner that also has really rich data, first party data, how can we use that data to match 3 months after the campaign, 6 months after the campaign, continuously match to prove that we're driving proper business outcomes for that brand, not just off the back of a click or, you know, a view that, the handbag example is really good because we work with a lot of really high-end fashion brands. You're not going to buy a handbag off the back of, seeing an ad in the Telegraph, but it might encourage you to go and browse in that particular store, and it might have an ultimate impact on your decision to buy that bag. But we can't prove that through a click because they're not going to go to a landing page and buy it. The whole point of buying a designer handbag is you go into the store, right? So we're really keen to look at how we can do that. It's kind of, it's still a work in progress, but we're really keen to just create something that's a bit more sophisticated than the attribution models that we have in place at the moment.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing. As we're up for time, maybe one last question, as you know, you are with an audience, the brightest advertiser here in the UK. Is what do you think, if you have to ask in terms of what is missing in industry right now to really make it work? What would you say?
I would say that confidence in, that actually buying reach for the sake of reach and kind of, scale and kind of, really have a conscious human editorial approach to the publishers that you are choosing, because everything we've talked about here today was talking about measuring, and actually so much of that means that the publisher, your publisher list becomes agnostic, and actually you're not focused on that at all. You're focused on other things, and that's when you start to see the made for advertising fake news sites slip in. And what we really ultimately want to do is make sure that advertising budgets are going to regulated journalism that's trying to do something important in society, rather than the divisive and toxic made for advertising sites that are just chasing the clicks. So I would say really think about have that human engagement with the publisher list that you're working with.
That's great. Thank you so much. Right on time. Please join me in saying a huge thank you to you, Anthony, for representing so well the publishing industry and the need for high-quality journalism. Thank you.
I can't believe that we've actually just got 2 sessions left. Time has absolutely flown by. No Attention event would be complete without a discussion about rats, religion, and radical transparency. And there isn't a single better person on this planet to give us that than my good friend Peter Grant. So if you could please unleash a torrent of applause for Peter Grant as he joins the stage.
Wow, that's quite an introduction. Thanks, Alex. I was saying to Alex just before that he was showing me the stage, and I said to him that I used to do a bit of acting when I was younger, and the last time I was on a stage like this, which I think is called a proscenium arch or something like that, I was playing Gregory in Gregory's Girl, and that's the last time I've been on a stage and until this time, and that's a lot of years ago. So I probably qualify as one of the old people in the room, I think. So I'm one of the people that read these. I'm not sure if I need. I remember the training when I was acting. It said you must speak from your diaphragm, so you imagine that you're speaking to the back of the room. Do I need the microphone? Okay, I'll have the microphone then. So yeah. Anyway, so my name is Peter Grant. And I'm head of media effectiveness at Boots. And you've probably read in the press over the last year or so that Boots is doing pretty well. So we've had something like, I think it's about 9 quarters of consecutive growth, something like that. So we came out of the pandemic really, really quite well, and it's a wonderful place to work. But it hasn't always been that way. I joined the business about 5 years ago, and one of the first things I was asked to look at was how many KPIs we have in the marketing team. After about 3 months of pulling out all the dashboards from all over the place, I'd counted 127. So we had 127 KPIs, and I looked at them and I thought, well, they can't all be KPIs. They can't all be key performance indicators, can they? Well, no, they can't be. Well, what about PIs? Have we got 120 PIs? And no, they're not all performance indicators either. And in actual fact, a lot of them aren't even indicators. So we had this massive things that we were all paying attention to in different ways. And herein lies the problem. Most of them weren't telling us anything about commercial outcomes. We'd heard quite a bit in the session before about the importance of commercial outcomes. Just as an aside, Alex said to me that this session is intended to be a light-hearted session. I wasn't sure what he meant, but having seen the session before last and the kind of Squid Game type thing that was going on, I understand what he means now. So we have all of these KPIs, all fighting for attention in the business, and none of them really getting anywhere. And I think what it was really was, for me, it wasn't about the amount of things that people are attending to. So, this has been touched on a little bit today, but not really put this way. I think what we're seeing across society and in our business is a context collapse. We've talked about the power of brand. I think you talked earlier about being able to see things kind of within context. There's the Armani handbag example, which again is about it's like this in that context and like that in a different context. There's a context collapse. I was thinking about this the other day, and I said to my son, he's 17, he's a real STEM type, not the most creative one in the family. And I said to him, what would you do if a tiger was running towards you? And he went, it would just eat me. I'd lie down and it would eat me. I went, all right, okay. He asked me, and I said what I said. And then I asked my daughter, who wants to be an architect, so she's quite mathematical as well, but a bit more creative. And I asked her the same question. She said, I would climb up a ladder. She imagined that there would be a ladder for her to climb up and escape. And then they asked me what I would do, and I said, well, I'd just stay in the house and keep the doors closed. And they said, well, that's cheating. I said, well, the way in which you answer that question is all down to the context, isn't it? Because the tiger running towards you has got your attention. It either matters enormously in terms of life and death, or it doesn't matter at all. So we've heard a little bit today about the quality of the attention, but it's the context. It's the context within which you're consuming it that is important. Now, whether you call that brand building and building up a latent amount of equity and awareness for your brand so that you then can grab people's attention the right way, or whether it's more about, as it is for Boots with younger people, finding ways of building that context for them at a time when they're consuming media on platforms which is increasingly fracturing and fragmenting that attention. That's the real challenge for, I think, trying to build a context or build a brand in a digital-first world with the behaviours that we see from young people with mobile phones. So that's that bit. So anyway, back to Boots and a little bit about our journey. So the point of that context bit is that we heard earlier how important it is to understand what your superordinate KPI is in the business, and we're a commercial operation, so straight away there should be a context for what you're doing. We're here to make money. We're here to drive value for the shareholders. If anybody thinks any different to that in a commercial operation, you're not going to last very long. So that's the first thing we did with those 127 KPIs. We said, well, how many of these are actually talking about financial outcomes? And very few of them were. I'm bringing it right back to the media world. We've had econometric modelling in Boots for probably about 15 years, but we've paid very little attention to it for probably at least 10 or 12 of those years. But having gone through this exercise and said what really matters, particularly to the finance types in a business, is how much money you're making for the money that they're taking out of the bank and giving you to invest and do the things that you like to do. So we arrived at a superordinate metric, which is return on investment for our media. And and everybody's mobilized around that, and we use that to inform the big decisions around how much money should we invest. So I have conversations with the finance team at the start of the year, and we say, well, how much should we invest in media? Should it be this number, that number, or a different number? How much more could we invest? If we did 5 million more, 10 million less, how would that impact the bottom line? We also use it for more granular decision making, like how much should go into each channel, and we can do that because we've got that level of resolution within the econometric modelling. So that works really well, but it's only one lens on the world, and I'm a sceptical type, and despite the level of traction that we've got in the business of that sort of thing, I believe that you should triangulate. I believe that you should get other views. I like to be wrong. I like to be proven wrong, and I like to prove others wrong as well. I'm quite a contrarian, so if I see something that is absolute, then I think, well, no, it can't be so. How about looking at it a different way? So this is where the test and learn bit comes in for us. So we've pulled in another supplier who is able to provide a more bottom-up, more granular view of return on investment. So we have this big superordinate measure of return on investment, which is informed by econometric modelling and by constant test and learn. So that's that bit. I'll just check my notes to see where I'm getting up to. Yeah, so we've done all of that, and here's a picture of a rat. So none of that really helps us to understand why some media works and why some media doesn't work. The old 50%, we know 50% works, but not 50%. I mean, that still rings true now. And I didn't know either. I'm not a marketeer, so I had no preconceptions about why. I mean, I know that creative plays a part, and I know you've got to get it in the right place, and I know people have got to see it. So I kind of knew a little bit about it. But about a year ago, I think Mike at Lumen was probably one of the first to call me. I started returning some calls from the different suppliers who claim that they can link their service or their view of the world, whether it's attention or something else, to financial outcomes. And I thought, okay, well, I don't know, so I'll get them all together. And it was really motivated by a piece of research that I read by a scientist called Jaak Panksepp. And he became famous in the 60s for his work that he did with rats. And he famously discovered that if you tickle a rat, it giggles. It giggles ultrasonically. So you need special equipment to be able to hear it, of course. But that's probably why they make such good pets. But the bit that was really fascinating for me is that he discovered an area of the brain called the play zone. And he did some amazing experiments, such as his genius. And he discovered that a rat that was only 10% bigger than another rat could pin its adversary 100% of the time if it wanted to do. But over iterations of the game, he discovered that didn't happen. And what happened is the younger, smaller rat wins at almost exactly 30% of the time. So the larger rat allows the young rat, or the smaller rat, to win. And this part of the brain, which is, he coined the play zone, exists in all mammals. So this idea of play, reciprocal voluntary play, exists in all of us. And the importance of that is that he discovered that if you deny a juvenile rat play, then it doesn't develop cognitively, it doesn't develop emotionally, it doesn't develop socially. They can't even mate. If you deny a male rat play when it's a juvenile, it can't even reproduce. So it's hugely important. And so what's going on there? There's a whole load of developmental stuff going on. There's a whole load of stepping into the unknown. So I thought, well, I'll get all of the suppliers together in a room and I'll see what happens. And that's what I did. So we've got all these guys, and this really was like the Hunger Games. I briefed them all. I said, right, Christmas is about this time last year. We're about to go into Christmas. We've got loads of data. You can have all of the data that you want. You tell me that you can do what you can do. You've been telling me this. So here you go. Have at it. Have the data, and then we'll reconvene in the new year. And you tell me what you've learned about our Christmas campaign. And that's what we did. So they all had the data. They all ran it through their own views of the world up to Christmas, and we convened on April the 20th this year. They all had a 15-minute brief. You got 15 minutes. We're all in the room. We're going to approach this with a spirit of play. It's going to be tense. It might be dangerous for one or two of you, but let's see what we can learn. And we had a great session, an absolutely fantastic session. There was not quite as much tension as we saw about 15 minutes ago, but there was a fair bit of tension. For the most part, it was pretty well behaved. And the important bit for our business was that, well, the important bit for me is that because I'm not a marketer, I wanted to find a way of getting people to work together, to build something together. Because I don't have any idea about really how to do this stuff. But I thought, if we can use lots of people's brains and get them working together in the right spirit, then we might be able to do that. And we came out with 2 or 3 pages of insights, which we've then been able to use for the planning of this Christmas campaign. And System 1 and Mesh are part of that. They've worked with us for some time. And we've got Ubiquity on board as our econometrics partner. So that bit worked really, really well. So faith and science. What I mean by this really is I think at the heart of the religious enterprise is this idea of faith. We touched on this a little bit today. And this for me is really about having the courage to take steps that you otherwise wouldn't take. We were chatting in the reception earlier today, and I believe Mark Ritson was talking a little bit about some of this yesterday, how there is an increasing lack of courage and bravery, if you like, in our world for various reasons, because either something ends up in litigation very quickly, or there's a degeneration into a polarised debate and somebody's become offended about something, and there's a real risk that everything is just descending into a grey mare. And so what I wanted to do is to make sure that we can avoid that wherever possible, avoid that trap wherever possible. And I think the enabler for me on this, the enabler to take those steps into the unknown, is to embrace the spirit of curiosity. I mean, I used to cyclocross race quite a bit, and anybody that's done that sort of thing, it's a crazy event, and you spend 60 minutes racing around a single track, and there are very few places to pass. And when the race starts, you scream away from the start, and I didn't know why people were doing this, but it soon becomes evident because there's a single track around the course, and you can very quickly get locked into following somebody else, and you're following. You're making progress, but you're following. And the only way in which you can get ahead of the competition is if you're prepared to go off the beaten track and take some risks. And I did that a few times, and you might hit a tree, or you might just end up on your face in a sand pit. But that's the way in which you can actually get ahead of your competition. And I'm a competitive type, so back at Boots, I encourage people through curiosity to ask questions about what might not be working, and then take some risks. Just gamble a little bit. Replace fear with bravery. I'm conscious I'm nearly running out of time, so I'll quickly rattle through this last bit. This is probably the most important bit. The only way in which any organisation such as Boots can secure funding to invest and do lots of these wonderful things that we're talking about is if you have absolute trust in your business. And that's what I mean by this, really. And so what I try to practice and what I encourage others around me to practice is a radical form of truth. And it's just be truthful with everything that you do, particularly when you're dealing with the finance team internally. There is a little bit of a temptation, as we all know, within the marketing world to shout and hurrah and celebrate everything that we do, but not everything works. And the finance and more prosaic types in the business, they know that, they see through that. So you've got to be absolutely credible, otherwise you won't be able to secure the funds that you maybe deserve to do. And that means when things go wrong, as they do, I mean, we had one about a year ago, the return on investment wasn't quite so good. And there was a lot of tension in the room and there was thoughts around how can we position this, how can we change the context, how can we emit some information that might make it look a little bit better than it was, but they smell that coming. You can't do that. Finance people have got a nose for that sort of thing. They know when they smell a rat or when they tickle a rat. So please, if I've got one piece of advice, avoid the temptation of doing that. And if you can build a strong relationship with the finance team, then you will, and you're doing well, and you're doing what you're supposed to do well, then you will be able to secure the funds to do the things that we all want to be able to do. So that's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. How many pet rats do you have?
We have none at the moment. We've got 2 pet rabbits.
Thank you. So we're down to the last session, and we've spoken a lot about capturing attention. We've looked at ways of measuring attention, but now the reality is when you finally got your ad in front of somebody, how do you keep that attention? And so we've brought together 4 of the finest minds again to help us to better understand how to create attention magnets. Now, rather than clap and applaud them onto stage, I'm going to ask everyone to do something slightly different. So bear with me, and I'm sorry. Please, can you all take your phones out? Please don't take a picture of me. You can if you want to. Now, turn on the torch. Hold it above your head. And as our panelists walk on, start to wave it, please. Come on, up you come, panelists.
Quite the rock star experience up here. Oh, it's a bit sad that ended. It's really enjoying my misspent youth there. Right, hello, and thank you for joining us for the last session of today. My name is Faye Littlemore, and I head up our brand studio. In just a second, I'm going to introduce the panelists. Really excited about this and to have you all here. This session, I think, is the missing piece, and I think, Tan, you mentioned earlier, the creative piece is really having tangible pre-points when everyone gathers around the table, when you're thinking about brand outcomes and building something that's meaningful and is going to get the type of attention that you need. So we're going to get into it, and I'm super excited. So first of all, can you introduce yourselves and give us an example of some creativity that got your attention recently, made you pause, even maybe act? Dom.
Hello. I'm Dom from Kantar, and recently I would sort of say McDonald's eyebrows. I mean, that isn't the advertising sphere, but a bit of creativity that stayed with me. 2 bits of creativity that stayed with me that aren't that recent. One, Glastonbury. What an amazing thing to come up with, the idea of Glastonbury. And secondly, the Eden Project, back from the 1990s, taking a chalk pit in Cornwall and turning it into a world extravaganza, and it's an experiential masterpiece. So I think creativity can kind of come from anywhere, and advertising is one forum for it, but it doesn't have to just be limited to advertising.
Nice. Deirdre?
Hi, I'm Deirdre Tippin. I'm from 3 UK. I've been there for about 18 months, but have many years in telco. So that's kind of the area I kind of know a lot about. The piece of creativity I've picked on is not actually that recent, but it's one that's stuck with me for quite a while, and it's the This Girl Can campaign. And what I loved about that is the fact that it showed real people in real situations trying to be the best version of themselves that they can be and have fun while doing it. And being a mother of 2 daughters, I thought that was really important. And also a person that, doesn't look like Cindy Crawford. It's really important that, people are represented in a real way. And I just thought it was fabulous. And it just brought joy to watch. So that was one that stood out for me.
Hello, everyone. I'm Orlando. I'm from System 1. I'm going to pick the Warburton's campaign, which I think is very entertaining, particularly the recent one with Samuel L. Jackson. What I like about it is the way that it's this kind of long-running device that, a new person comes in, a celebrity comes in, and pitches an idea for an ad. This one's slightly a twist on that. But it's really very good because it's fun, and it has this long-running device, and it shows you how to use celebrity, which is to get them to do their turn for you. And that's what they do brilliantly.
Thank you. Arjun.
Hi, I'm Arjun. I work up at General Mills. I've been there for 8 years. I've worked across a variety of marketing roles in UK, Europe, and now international. I suppose the creative platform that has always resonated with me and continues to do so is Snickers. You're not you when you're hungry. And again, kudos to that for something that is deeply insightful, but also increasingly consistent. Yet, there's always a narrative of freshness that comes in, so it unfailingly works.
Nice. Well, one of the things that strikes me with all of those examples that I didn't know what you're all going to say, but none of them sort of happened yesterday. These are all campaigns that have either had a kind of theme established over several years or something that sticks with us from our youth or something like that. And I think if someone was planning and buying those campaigns on today's digital world and the channels that are now available, maybe we'd feel a bit differently about them. So I think we heard from Peter before about what attention span looks like in the here and now. Alex, our CRO, started by saying, you know, the average screen time for an American is 10 hours every day. So in the here and now, what does it actually mean to capture and keep attention? And is all attention equal? Orlando, come to you first.
I think when you're looking at things from a creative perspective, as I do really, I've been looking at the work of Ian McGilchrist, who's a brilliant psychologist, psychiatrist, neuroscientist, and I think he makes it pretty clear to understand how you might go about that, at least I think so anyway. He talks about there being two different types of attention. This sort of broad beam attention, which is always on, you know, so us being aware of things that are happening just slightly off stage over there, maybe. And then there's this sort of narrow beam attention, which is, you know, focused attention, often quite close up. You see this in people, you see it in mammals, you see it in birds. And it's sort of, you know, one type of attention, the broad beam attention, is making sure that we're not getting eaten, whilst the other one is focusing on what we're going to eat ourselves, you know. So there are these two different types of attention, broad and narrow beam attention. And when you look at what the broad beam attention is interested in, and it's the right hemisphere of the brain that's interested in this and that presents the world to us, it's understanding context, social context, the living. It deals with lived time, with narrative, with music. It understands things on two levels, so it can understand metaphor and it can understand humor. And then the left hemisphere is really not very good at doing any of those things. And the narrow beam attention that's, you know, sort of a bit more predatory, if you like, that's close up, is tends to flatten things, so it sees things as flat. It's more interested in language, the left hemisphere, deals with tools. And it's can't really deal with lived time, so you get these sort of short, sharp cuts. So it's like railway tracks. Sleepers on a railway track that just hit you, hit you, hit you. That's how the sort of left hemisphere sees things, and it fixes things. So when you look at these two types of attention, you find that these actually that they look a bit like the two sort of dispositions, the two schools of advertising that have always kind of existed. You know, going back 100, 150 years. One that is more direct. And one that is more oblique and holistic and charms through an emotional appeal, through character, through people, through dialogue, through humor. And that's indeed what we find when we look at the ability of different types of advertising to generate emotional response. So if you're looking to brand build, then you need sort of advertising that often involves people, characters, music, humor, metaphor, where people join the dots themselves and put things into memory. And emotion goes into helps to put things in memory as well. And all those things drive emotion as well as this broad beam attention. And then you've got this narrow beam attention, which so features like those short, sharp cuts, the words on the screen, the rhythmic soundtracks, all of those things. Those drive very direct effects. A short term, you know, getting to a website, pushing people towards downloading an app. Very different kind of effects from the sort of broad beam advertising of the right hemisphere.
Yeah, and you talk about the two schools there, the brand building, the brand performance, and I think that's a theme that came up in the agency provocation session. You know, you're really thinking about how brand building is affected by attention metrics. And I'd love to hear from both Deirdre and Arjun, when it comes to brand building and brand performance, how differently do you approach creative messaging for those particular schools? Whoever wants to go. Deirdre.
I'll go. So we use quite different creative for brand building and performance. And it's because we're trying to be single-minded when we're trying to sell. You know, we want people to stay on message and understand exactly what it is that we're trying to do. Also, the industry I'm in, it's highly competitive. It's become a utility, so there's less and less between us. I think it's a really interesting dilemma that we have at the moment internally, because, you know, we're trying to make sure we stand for something and people understand what that is. We've a way to go, if we're honest, and that's what we're having major discussions about right now for next year. But I also think at the heart of it, though, no consumer, and I know we're not really normal because we don't look at things like normal people. We just don't. It's because of the industry we're in. But customers don't sit at home with one hat on going, oh, I'm going to look at this because it's a brand ad, and then I'm going to look at this ad in a different way because it's a performance ad. They just don't. But I also think performance is often seen as like the poor relation, that it's a bit down and dirty. You know, it's very price driven and outcome driven. But actually, if you do it right, and it doesn't have to be overly fancy, it can be really effective at driving brand metrics as well. So DRTV, for example, a recent campaign I've done, hugely drove consideration where we weren't expecting it. It had a good ROI, it drove gross ads, but it actually drove consideration because actually from a brand recognition and linkage point of view, it scored really highly. We had the right colour, we had a good audio, we had a mnemonic at the end, so it all linked up to what the brand was, and that's really important.
What was that formula again?
Oh God, don't ask me to repeat
Colour,
it.
logo.
Well, yeah, no, it's audio and visual cues that just remind people of what it is. But yes, but it evolves and it changes. And sorry, somebody said earlier on a panel, which I think is really important, is context. So what you do on TV is different to what you do in social, which is different to what you do in digital platforms. And that can be lost because you're trying to have matching luggage. And I don't think we need to do that.
Yeah.
Matching luggage kills campaigns. I mean, all of our Kantar data shows that when you customise to platform, it increases increases effectiveness by about 60%. So it's got to be integrated, true to the brand, true to the campaign, but it's got to be customised according to the context and the platform and the format within the platform as well. So violently agree with that. And yeah.
And Arjun, obviously with brand building, we're really thinking about often making a lasting impact. So for General Mills, it's not about just buying a product now, it's making it a staple in the cupboard, being something you continue to buy through your lifetime. What are the kind of considerations that General Mills have for making lasting impact when it comes to creative?
I mean, we obviously have our internal frameworks, and recently, we've been through this with the organization. But again, it's a framework we call that is kind of focused on three big things, which is like relevance, and that's like how do you make it really relevant to their lives. I think the second thing when it comes to all things brand building is the emotional response. That is obvious, but within that, I think there are two bits that we really dial up. One of which is like personal, because it's like how do you make it as personal as you can, because our brains are hardwired to respond to some things that are personal, what you call the cocktail party effect. Like you're talking in a party and your ears perk up no matter how noisy it is if you hear someone's voice. And the second piece in terms of really getting attention or garnering attention is surprise. And the formula that we sort of try and apply to surprise is, surprise works if, again, the brain is hardwired to react to something that is not quite normal. And within that is it violating expectations, physical or otherwise? And secondly, is it a contrast effect to what is a current context? So I'd say, and finally, of course, I think where we're getting more and more obsessive is distinctiveness and making sure that we are our distinct memory codes are coming to life more and more. So specific to, say, a Häagen-Dazs, whether it's the color codes of burgundy, whether it's the cartouche, when we talk about the old El Paso, making sure we've got color codes like red, the roof, family, all of that, meal times. We're just getting a lot more bullseye on this. Yeah. And I will say, it eventually is about consistency. We're constantly chopping and changing. We're trying to get a lot more disciplined in terms of making sure our creative is playing the longer game.
So I definitely want to come back to a predictive approach to creative, because I think it maybe stems into another theme that I really want to touch base on. But just going back a little bit to context, Dom, and what you were saying about how important it is. Essentially, brands are connected to audiences, and advertising is that link. How important is context when it comes to creative consideration?
So Oxford business schools, it has done some meta-analysis of campaigns over the last 40 years, and it shows that essentially campaigns are about half the sales elasticity, or the sales response per advertising impression is basically halved over the last 40 years. One of the reasons for that is creative quality, another is media fragmentation. And so what we see is that the importance from our Kantar cross-media database, very exciting, shows...
Check it out.
Yeah, check it out. Essentially shows that the importance of synergy, campaign synergies across different platforms has doubled in importance over the last 12 years. And that's because of media fragmentation. So it's become more, to your point about context, it's more important than ever to be consistent and to have that glue across your campaign. But that doesn't mean matching luggage. It means you've got to be consistently different. All of our data shows that difference, or the perception of difference, is one of the biggest drivers of creative effectiveness and commercial outcomes in terms of ROMI. And the challenge is to to have that consistent difference in a way which flexes and breathes across different contexts and environments, so that frankly you're not boring the pants off your audience, right? Because you're competing with pop culture. You're not competing just with other ad campaigns. It's always been the case. It's not a new thing, but what we see time and again is wind tunnel creativity. You remember in the 1960s, cars were cool. You'd have a Corvette with their Stingray-style sort of fins. And creativity is a bit the same. And suddenly when wind tunnels came in, cars start to look the same. And it's the same with creativity. And if you don't have that sort of consistent difference done in your own way as a brand, then you're essentially doing yourself a ROMI disservice. You'll fail hard and fast.
I'd agree with that. I was just going to say that consistency, a bit like symmetry in art. We haven't talked much about art here, have we? Is an enemy of movement. So one of the ways to create a campaign that's consistent is to have a character that lives, in it. So I call them a fluent device. So a character like the meerkats, for instance, that's consistent, but actually appeals to the broad beam attention of the right hemisphere and is interesting and does things and surprises. And to your point, Arjun, you were talking about the extraordinary, something emerging from a scene type thing. We found that again and again to be, the sort of thing that drives attention and emotional response in video, online video, but also TV. And just one artistic principle, very briefly, if you'll allow me. So in the 17th century in Italy, there was this way of thinking about art where they would show people at a moment, at a sort of turning point, and where the hero's luck was changing. And they would reveal emotion through the body, through the face, and at the most heightened emotional moment. And it was called moto e azione, moto from movere, to move, and azione, sort of the actions that transpire at that point. And if you look back at some of the great ads from CDP in the 1970s, so Hamlet cigars, for instance, if any of you remember those, some of the Heineken ads as well, the water at the Yorker doesn't taste like water. And, and they walk away, that change, that transformation, that moment, when you reveal an insight of some kind, those artists believed at the same time you're also going to amplify the emotional response. So an artistic principle that actually works really well in advertising too, and that helps to, I suppose, make sure that you're owning that kind of narrative.
So owning the narrative, surprising, but in a good way. I think we're going back to something Anthony said earlier, one of the Telegraph's principles, which was engage, don't enrage. There's lots of things that we can build upon, attention indicators for creative. And I want to come back to that subject of being predictive. So understanding if a certain length of video is going to get the business outcome that you want, understanding that audio teamed with a certain colour. So there's loads to build on. But the more that we get predictive, are we becoming more predictable? How much can a brand use to be high-performing as a creative, but still maintaining some sort of authenticity?
So if I had one bit of advice to everyone, it would just be funny. Honestly, lighten up. Honestly, but by far, it's the biggest predictor, more so than, I know we've talked a lot about attention. Actually, emotion has about double the impact of attention on value market share predictions based on our modelling, at least. And it's just, it's creative heroin, okay, or creative crack, right? If you can make people smile, create a feel-good emotion, and link it to your brand, we call it the creative magnifier. 5%. If you do that in 5%, it has 45% of outcome on outcomes. That's right. So don't underestimate the power of simply making people smile and the feel-good factor.
There was a really good paper a couple of years ago all about the rise of sadvertising, which great pun, first of all, but secondly, it was everywhere. It was about making people feel, but it was heavy. And
But it's really, so we see humour has declined, humour has basically halved over the last 20 years in advertising, according to our global database. And humour in digital is about half that of TV, and it's declining too. So there's some burning platforms, and everyone in this room, creative media planners, strategists, clients, we're all responsible. We're all responsible. We overthink stuff. Listen to your gut. Allow people the freedom to create, to be creative with format, to be creative with campaigns, with executions, and just lighten the hell up.
we need the play zone, right? Where's Peter?
Yeah,
It is
the play zone, right?
Yeah,
But the data shows it. It's not just my opinion. The data consistently shows it. Our data, your data, other people's data.
Don't you think, though, that stems from short-termism in a way, though? Because we're always chasing the quarter, the year results, that we kind of lose sight of that longer view and that longer terminal. And I think it's harder to get buy-in for that. I completely agree with you. But another point is the linkage to the brand is really important, because just being funny for funny's sake can fall on its face.
Totally agree.
Arjun, obviously, some great brands at General Mills. I'm not going to ask you to be funny, but can you, on the spot, give us a joke? No. Can you think of an example where you guys have tried to employ any of this, and how has that worked in terms of getting the right attention?
I think the big discussion we tend to have is it something that is truly creatively ownable to us, right? I think that's the starting point. Like, being funny for the sake of being funny is great. And then to your point, it's about linkage. Like, as we think about storytelling, are we having main character energy, to use a very pop culture phrase? Is that something we can really do before we go down the humor path? Is where we would genuinely challenge ourselves. So again, when it comes to emotion, I guess there are two things in terms of, hey, what's the range of emotion you want to go down? Because is it do you want to make them smile? Do you want to make them crack up? And then finally, are you going to be memorable for it, right? Because the problem with a lot of really funny ads or creative pieces is the attribution. Like, they don't remember you. So you got on this path and you do all of it, but it's not serving your brand. So I guess it boils down to the storytelling and the narratives. And is that something that can truly be creatively ownable by us and our right to play in that field?
Nice. We are at time. Can I have one more question? Okay, good. So we also are in the very lovely position that this is the last question of the day. So it's going to be more linked to the theme of attention, but you can be as creative as you like. There you go, segue. We're going to give each of you 30 seconds. If there's one thing that you can impart to the audience as a takeaway, your key takeaway about attention in our industry today, what would it be? Dom?
Don't think, link. We've talked about linked creativity. Our methodology is called LINK for a good reason. Link to emotion, link to your brand, link to popular culture, because consumers don't care about your brand. So you've got to link it in a way which is relevant to real people. Start with them, not with you.
Great. Deirdre?
Context. So the environment you're in and the format you're in, make sure it's bespoke and it works as best it can.
Okay. Orlando?
It's just that something that Bill Bernbach said about attention and storytelling, and it was that make sure that the device or the idea that captures attention also tells the story.
hopefully that's what we've done today. Arjun.
I believe it was Einstein that said compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns from it. He who doesn't pays for it. So, this really is about, being stable on strategy and fresh on execution. Just be consistent, put it out there, and, you'll probably start to see the effects. That's certainly something we're starting to believe in more and more. So compound interest, guys.
Thank you. Thank you all. Round of applause for the panel.
Thank you very much. I must admit, I felt quite emotional during that session, just because these 4 panelists are absolute legends in my mind and experience, and having them here sharing their wisdom really hit a heartstring for me. We're about to finish. We've got the outside space until 5 o'clock, so I encourage everybody here to please do one thing. Speak with the speakers, speak with each other, continue the conversation and discussion. Clearly attention is something that's growing and requires quite an evolution. So this is the starting point for a discussion, but I encourage you all to continue it. I want to thank each and every single one of you for taking 2 hours out of your day today. I appreciate that your time is valuable and it's a choice for being here. I hope that you've had as much fun and you've had as much value as I certainly have. And the last thing that I want to do is I just want to say thank you to the team that pulled all of this together. There's a lot of people that were involved in it, and I won't call them all individually, but I just want to say thank you to everybody that's come here, the speakers, the panelists. One big final avalanche of applause for everyone here. And please head out, have a drink, meet some new people. Thank you, everybody.